tell me what was one of the projects that you most loved and why?
Oh, wow. I think, I mean, they all have their specific moments. All their histories are completely different. Many of the reasons why they've become stateless are completely different. Yet the fact is that a common theme that runs between all of them is that they're denied the fundamental right to have rights, that they're denied an identity. And because of that, they have a number of similar kind of traits that follow through them from one day to the next, whether it be the denial of the right to education, the denial of the right to work, the denial of the right to the process of law, etc., etc. Those are some of the common themes that run across a lot of stateless people that I've met. But obviously the work that I've done on the Rohingya, I've been really passionate about because I really believe it's one of probably the most important stories out there, at least in Southeast Asia, for people to pay attention to.
Okay, tell me why that story is important. How did you feel when you went into Rakhine State and saw these people? The Human Rights Watch and the United Nations has said that the Rohingyas may be the most persecuted people, minority group in the world.
Yeah.
What do you think of this statement?
I think it's completely and totally accurate. I mean, I do believe that it is probably one of the most extreme cases of human rights abuse in the world today. I think it's also an extreme case of a prolonged period of human rights abuse and exclusion of any community in the world today as well. I mean, when you think that 800,000 people of one particular community who have lived in a country even before it became a country are being denied the fundamental right to belong and all of the different abuses and problems that go along with that, it is a very extreme case. You know, when you see the violence that happened in Burma last year, the fact is that, now, almost 10 months later, or almost a year after the initial violence, these particular people there's been very little effort in trying to find a way for these people to go back to their homes because really they don't exist. It's quite discouraging, I think, in the context of what's happening, the positive developments that people are saying are happening in Burma at large.
You said that the Rohingyas don't have a home, but the Burmese majority, call the Rohingyas Bengalis because they believe that the Rohingyas came from Bangladesh. And they dismissed it as an immigration issue on the recent violence.
Yeah.
Some would say it's communal violence. Other people say, quote unquote, it's genocide. But what is it? What do you think? Is it an immigration issue?
I don't believe it's an immigration issue because everything points towards that this particular community has lived in this particular area of Rakhine, or what used to be called Arakan, for centuries, for years and years and years. The fact is that Burma became a country in 1946, I think it is. And before that, there were no borders. So yes, you ultimately have people that were passing through, migrating along, or whatever it is. But the fact is that the Rohingya community that live there today have lived there for decades and generations. And simply the fact that they are being denied the right to actually exist and be recognized in a place that they consider to be their home is in so many different ways is a violation of human rights. I do not believe that it's an immigration issue.
And when you saw these people, where were they living? How were they living? And how were the laws implemented for the Rohingyas?
Yeah. The way that the Rohingya inside of Burma, specifically in Rakhine, the way that they're living right now is pretty desperate. I mean, the capital city of the Rakhine state is Sittwe. And in Sittwe, prior to the violence, Muslims and Buddhists had coexisted together for decades and decades and decades. And now, after the violence has happened, you have hundreds of thousands of people who used to live in Sittwe, who used to have homes, who used to have businesses, that are now kind of amputated from their homes. There's very little sign of them being able to be returned. In terms of reflection of laws towards this, there really are no particular definitions of laws and how they are being implemented toward this community. I mean, the Rohingya community who are IDPs, roughly 120 to 130,000 of them originally in Rakhine right now, they see very little future ahead of them other than continuing to live in makeshift camps or in hay or huts that are made of straw and hay because they're unrecognized, or in crumbling old buildings on rubber plantations or palm oil or palm plantations. They really have a very tenuous kind of existence right now.
You were there recently, right? Can you tell me when you were there?
Yeah,
Like,
I was there in February, late February, early March of 2013.
2013.
Yeah.
So this was way after the violence had broken out in June of 2012.
Yes.
But did you still see the remnants of the fighting from June 2012?
Completely, yeah. There's still identification there of the aftermath of the violence in June of 2000. The Muslim neighborhoods in Sittwe are completely been razed to the ground.
You said 2000. Can you say 2012?
I'm sorry,
I'm
2012. There are still indications left of the violence from 2012 from last year, even today. You go through all the different Muslim areas, the Muslim quarters of Sittwe, and they're all rubble. There's nothing there anymore. There's no homes, there's no businesses. It's literally as if a natural disaster came through and swept through it. But actually, this is a man-made disaster that's happened. So most of the mosques in Sittwe are just shells or have been completely destroyed. So you go through Sittwe and a lot of other cities that I haven't been to, so I can't particularly talk about them, but at least at Sittwe, there is definitely indications of this violence that's left over. In the central market of Sittwe, where Muslims Rohingya used to have their businesses, those businesses are now shuttered up. They're empty right now. So yes, there's definitely signs of the aftermath of the violence.
Greg, and you focused on the Rohingyas,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the Rakhine,
Mm-hmm.
they also say that they feel left out
Mm-hmm.
from this because they feel as if the international community has been focusing only on the Rohingyas
Mm-hmm.
because we've seen that they are stateless people. They have rights taken away from them. But can you talk a little bit about the Rakhine? Did you see if they were suffering? From this quote unquote communal violence?
In my observations that you do have people from the Rakhine community who are continue to be displaced. And the reality of it is that both of these communities, the Rohingya community and the Rakhine Buddhist community in the Rakhine state, have always had a bad deal historically when it comes to the central government. They both have been manipulated, exploited, played off of each other, and a lot of ways this has been manufactured over decades by various Burmese governments.
Can you elaborate on this? Because when this violence broke out in 2012, people had said that it was the government that stood by and did nothing, and actually led and participated in the Rakhine in this violence between the Rakhine and the Rohingyas.
Yeah. When
the Rohingya men were burnt in the truck.
Well, the fact is that both communities, and it's widely known that during the violence of 2012, June 2012, July 2012, both communities committed atrocities against each other. That's a fact. But the reality of it is that the aftermath of that particular violence was heavily weighted and targeted towards the Muslim Rohingya community. And you have Rakhine Buddhists who are now working in jobs, who are living in their homes, who have opportunities and everything like that, whereas you have the Rohingya community who have basically been totally isolated and segregated in an apartheid-like kind of way from the rest of the Buddhist community that they, for decades, have coexisted with in a long time, for many, many years. So I think that it's not weighted equally in terms of the repercussions that the violence had on both communities. I mean, it's definitely, the Rohingya community has taken the majority of the violence and displacement happened towards that community and not the Rakhine community.
There's a little irony and paradox in what you say, though,
Mm-hmm.
because you say that they have existed, the Buddhists and the Muslims, in Rakhine State
Mm-hmm.
for centuries.
Yeah.
How come this coexistence of peace, as you can say, right? How did it break out? And why is it like this?
Well, I mean,
Or has there always been tension?
I think that there has always been tension. I think the big question right now is, where has this tension originated from? Has this been something, again, has this something that has been manufactured, implemented, implanted by over decades worth of abuse by both communities on the part of the central government, Burmese successive Burmese governments towards both communities, pitting them towards each other, I don't know. I can't give you that answer. But the fact is that both communities have suffered for many, many years under the Burmese regimes, but the Rohingya is an extreme case of what has happened to an ethnic community in Greater Burma.
How has the communal, how has the central government ignited this? Like you
I particularly, to be honest with you, I wouldn't be able to comment on that because I haven't experienced it firsthand. I mean, there's plenty of reports and stuff like this that talk that more experts who have done research on that could probably comment on.
Off the record.
Yeah.
I saw this. I've seen many signs like
yeah.
on Facebook and
yeah.
where people take pictures and they say these
yeah.
are draconian laws. These
sure.
are like Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
But what do they mean? Because I haven't really been there.
Well, I mean, I guess to kind of answer that, I mean, I think most people have to understand, there's a big difference between the Rohingya community that live in North Rakhine and the Rohingya community that live in and around Sittwe. In North Rakhine, the 3 townships of North Rakhine, is basically under the control of an immigration force that's notorious for being the main perpetrators of human rights abuse against the Rohingya, called Nasaka. It's the only place that this particular government authorized force works in all of Burma. Nasaka only works in Rakhine. And they have been the main perpetrators of human rights abuse in the sense that they are the ones that are implementing laws and extortion that deal specifically with people with the Rohingya community in North Rakhine. The simple fact that government directives have been given in North Rakhine to where Rohingya cannot get married without having or having formal permission from the authorities in the villages in which they live is pretty extreme. So when you're talking about laws and stuff, I wouldn't be able to comment on them, but I can tell you that certain, there are a number of different administrative constrictions that are placed on the Rohingya community in North Rakhine that have basically paralyzed them from being able to live dignified lives.
So you've traveled around the world. Tell me some of the places that you've been, that you photographed of, Lebanon, in Africa. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
Well, I mean, over the past 8 years of working on this project, NoWhere People, I mean, I've traveled to, Bangladesh, Burma, Malaysia, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Ivory Coast, Kuwait, Lebanon, Ukraine, and Dominican Republic.
And what are the similarities that you see from all of these stateless people, including the Rohingyas?
I mean, I think that probably the most common kind of fundamental theme that they all share is that all of them have been born in countries and most of them are not refugees. They've never left their home country. Yet at the same time, they're denied fundamental rights to actually belong and be identified and have an identity in the country that they belong to. And it's this yearning to be formally recognized, to be able to participate and have rights in the country of their birth. And I think that is one very common theme that runs across all the different people, stateless people around the world that I've talked to.
Is there a solution?
I think there probably are solutions, but to be completely honest with you, I don't think I'm in the position to comment on what those solutions are. I mean, statelessness is a very complex subject. It involves a lot of legal issues that, as not a lawyer, I wouldn't be able to comment on.
What is statelessness?
I mean, you can look at the defined kind of definitions, and that would be people who have been denied or stripped of their citizenship and can't prove that they're a citizen of any country in the world. But, after 8 years of working on this particular issue, I think statelessness really comes down to 2 fundamental things. It comes down to the denial of the right to basically have rights, and also the denial to an identity as someone who actually exists in the world today and that actually should have access to fundamental human rights.
Last question.
Yeah.
You had stated a statement that a Bangladeshi or a Rohingya man in Bangladesh had told you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat it? It was something about a bird.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I don't
You
think.
don't have
Wait a minute. I think I have it. Hold on. I don't know if off the top of my head. Even a bird has rights. A bird can build a nest, give birth, bring food to their children, and raise them until they are ready to fly. We don't have basic rights like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So much.